Ang mga pananaw at opinyon ng pag-uulat ng mag-uulat sa programang ito ay hindi ang pangunahing posisyon o pahayag ng pamunuan ng organisasyong ito. The views and opinions expressed in this live report are those of the presenter and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the management of this organization. Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Dobre večer. Welcome to our special edition of Magpayo Tayo Kainklusyon. Today is Saturday, February 26, 2022. I am your host, Carlos Kanahashi. Christian Gerald Chan and Asher Santos will be joining with me in just a moment, and for our technical supervisor, Sir Mark Paulo Betita. We are broadcasting simultaneously on InkluRadyo Facebook page and on the Hands in Inclusion Philippines YouTube channel. We shall commence our presentation in just a moment. We will be back after our commercials. Now this.
Para sa aking pamilya, para sa aking kapwa, at para sa bayan. Kahit mahirap, kahit masakit, mahal ko kayong lahat. Kahit anong mangyari, ikaw, ako, tayo. Ating isisigaw sa mundo. Inklusibong may tatag, angat buhay itatahak. Matapang pa rin tayo. Ang tropa, hindi nang iiwan. Ang senyas, isang instrumento. Ilang beses matumba, tayo huling baba. Luman ang ating pinagaling. Tayo ay muling liliwan. Para sa pangarap, para sa pamilya, at para sa bayan. Tayo ang ida. Tuloy ang inclusion.
Okay. Hi, Christian. Good evening.
Hello, good evening.
Your script, please, and your part.
Yes,
Please.
yes, I have it.
Where is it?
I have a copy of it, so I'm not sharing it right now.
You just read it.
Yes.
Your lines, please.
All right. Are we starting?
Yes.
Okay.
Just finish our commercials.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Magpayo tayo Kainklusyon. This evening, ladies and gentlemen, we will discuss to you about the conflict between Russia and Ukraine and how this affect our country. Ay, nako. Gira na naman, Carlos?
Yes!
Russia and Ukraine, baka naman madawat ang Pilipinas dyan, ha?
Hindi naman. Safe tayo. Ngunit may epekto pa rin dito sa ating bansa.
How so, bossing? How so?
So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we shall now discuss our topic. Okay. Your screen ko muna, ha? Okay. Hear your part. Okay. So, ito na nga. Here. Okay. So, ito na nga. Ito. The Asia-Pacific region, including the Philippines, will likely feel the impact of escalating tension and the threat of invasion by Russia of Ukraine by way of global price shocks and trade disruption, according to Debt Watcher Moody's Investor Service on Wednesday, February 23. In a statement, Moody's Managing Director Michael Taylor said the economies they watch in Asia Pacific had limited direct exposure to Russian or Ukrainian entities. As such, we do not anticipate there would be any immediate or direct ratings impact from the situation in Ukraine.
All right. But Moody's said the region may not be immune to second-round effects of a conflict. Among the possible transmission channels are commodity prices, trade effects, and financial market disruption, Moody's said. For instance, G3 domestic creditors during the past week sought higher yields for short-dated treasury bills, making it more expensive for the government to borrow through the local debt securities market. global oil prices were also on the rise, while the world watched developments on the Ukrainian-Russian border.
So since Asher is not here and he will be late, he will be late now. You
Okay.
read their Asher's part here.
All right. Thank you. The global price of oil and liquefied natural gas is likely to rise sharply in the event of a conflict. This will be positive for the relatively few exporters in the Asia Pacific region and negative for the substantially greater number of net energy importers. Moody's said the Philippines is a net oil importer. However, a mitigating factor is that several Asian economies have long-term supply contracts in place for LNG, which will limit the impact of fluctuations in the spot price, Moody's said.
Last week, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Monetary Policy Report noted that Dubai crude oil spot price surged thus far in February this year
Oh.
compared to the previous month's levels due to worries over tight supply conditions given political tensions emerging in Europe between Russia and Ukraine, as well as Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Houthi rebels. Still, elevated natural gas prices, which could be exacerbated with the ongoing Ukraine crisis, could drive oil prices higher as consumers switch to oil products, the BSP said.
The BSP said that given the volatility in oil has again increased, it is important to remain vigilant in implementing measures that could help avoid second round effects in terms of fare hikes and undue wage adjustments as needed. Also, Moody's said that trade effects are likely to arise from import diversion and diversification, though there may be opportunities for commodity producers in Central Asia to increase supply to China. Supply chain bottlenecks would also be aggravated, including adding to inflation pressures in the region, Moody's added. Global and domestic price pressures, like the prolonged battle against the African swine fever locally, were expected to elevate headline inflation to an average of 3.7% this year from the previous forecast of 3.4%. Moody's also warned that the financial market effects will have the largest near-term impact. For example, if a conflict gives rise to widespread risk aversion, funding conditions for high-yield issuers, some of which are already experiencing constrained access to finance due to other factors, will deteriorate further. Nako, Carlos. Sa mga
Mm.
nagmamaneho, before sa mga magmamaneho, be sure to save up kasi expensive na po ang gas. Pero wait, ba't gas kaya? Wait, are we talking about the Russian-Ukrainian war, Carlos?
Oh, Christian. Kaya naman po. Pero, ito na ang ating presentasyon. Sir Mark, can you please share screen our PowerPoint, please? Okay. Okay. So here is our presentation, ladies and gentlemen. Next slide, please. Our topic is about the Russia-Ukraine crisis. And how is this affecting our country? Next slide, please. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, here, the Ukraine-Russia crisis or the Russia-Ukraine crisis, which began about 8 years ago, has taken on new dimensions following the controversial recognition of Moscow regarding the independence of the separatist regions in the eastern part of Ukraine. In a speech late Monday, the President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, announced the recognition of the separatist regions of Luhansk and Donetsk, while also questioning the sovereignty of Ukraine and accusing the West of ignoring Moscow's core security concerns. So what does this mean? It began with Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republic. These two republics, ladies and gentlemen, Donetsk and Luhansk, are located in eastern Ukraine.
Right.
So, while internationally recognized as in Ukraine, these Donetsk and Luhansk are under the de facto administration of these two countries.
Okay.
So, my question, can tourists and other people travel to Donetsk and Luhansk? Well, Ukrainian authorities will refuse entry to foreigners who attempt to enter Ukraine from Russia through Crimea or separatist-controlled areas in Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast. If you choose to travel to these areas despite the risk level, you should have a special permit from the authorities from Ukraine.
Okay.
Next slide, please, Sir Mark. Christian, your
All
part,
right.
please.
Thank you. He later ordered the deployment of Russian troops to maintain peace in the breakaway regions. Ika nga sabi nga, separatist eh. Putin's moves have been widely condemned as serious violations of international law, with Western countries threatening harsh new sanctions. Among these sanctions is most likely some of these sanctions would be cutting out of the will be cutting the funds of Russia. That's the
And also Ukraine should cut diplomatic ties with Russia as well. And airlines should already stop um, flights to and from Ukraine and not pass through their airspace as a safety measure. Next slide, please. Okay.
all right.
Okay, Asher. Here. Russia had falling out with Ukraine after the former Soviet Republic grew closer to the European Union. How is this started, ladies and gentlemen? It was all started in 2013, wherein Viktor Yanukovych Yanukovych, the pro-Russian fourth president of Ukraine, announced that would order the suspension of the association agreement of the European Union to prevent the country from turning to the West. Why? Because this move marked the beginning of a deep crisis in the political history of Ukraine. For months, thousands of protesters gathered in Independence Square in the capital city of Kiev to protest the decision of the president of Ukraine, Yanukovych. Clashes erupted from time to time between the protesters, with pro-Russians taking to the streets of Independence Square. Why did Christian?
Hmm.
Why did Russia cut out ties with Ukraine? Because of its approximate close to the EU member countries, based on the
Yes.
time.
Because if you think about it, the Russia and the EU are probably, let's say neutral. Let's say neutral terms. For now, it's neutral terms, but I think there will be tensions naman eh. Since Russia has different views with the rest of the EU, I guess. So I don't know.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, when the protests escalated out of control, the president of Ukraine fled to Russia. Ukraine is separated geographically between Europe and Russia. So are the people who are divided into pro-Russians and pro-Western. Later, tensions expanded to Crimea and the eastern region of Donbas, bordering Russia. Crimea, the government of Crimea, through its parliament, decided to hold a referendum that would allow Russia to get rid of Crimea, but or to annex Crimea or to separate Crimea from Russia. But international observers called the vote illegitimate. Why?
I
Because there were tensions or disputes between the Donbas region near the border of Russia and Ukraine.
All right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Next slide, please. Your part, please.
All right. Despite the protests of Crimean Tatars and Ukrainians, Russia illegally annexed or absorbed Crimea following the controversial referendum on March 16, 2014. The invasion of Crimea by Russian soldiers region triggered regional and international condemnation.
So in other words, despite the disputes and the protests of the Tatars, the ethnic groups of the Crimeans, and Ukrainian nationals, Russia eventually got rid of Crimea following its controversial referendum in 2014. Because why? Why did Russia illegally annex Crimea? Why?
I don't know actually.
Let's research. Let's research why. The reason why, it's because Russian President Vladimir Putin said that Russian troops in the Crimean Peninsula were aimed to ensure proper conditions for the people of Crimea to be able to freely express their will, while its Ukraine and other nations argue that such intervention is a violation of the independence and sovereignty of Ukraine. Next slide, please. Here. Next. Christian, here.
All right. Pro-Russian separatists also claimed control of eastern Ukraine, including the Donbas region, which they have illegally controlled for the past 8 years. In February 2014, pro-Russian separatists attacked pro-government troops in the Donetsk and Luhansk Donbas regions. The two regions are densely populated by people of Russian origin.
And why did they do this? It's because, ladies and gentlemen, why did Russia attack? Why? It's
Because I think it's because of the connection to the people, though.
and
And I think the
it's because uh in the beginning of March, ladies and gentlemen, in the aftermath of the revolution in Ukraine in 2014, and the Euromaidan movement led by pro-Russians, anti-government separatist group took place in Donetsk and Luhansk in Ukraine, called the Donbas region. Why? Because when the initial, that's why it was recognized by Ukraine and Russia that as a result of the invasion, the DPR and LPR insurgents regained much of the control of the territory, preceding the military offensive. That's why there was a war against of the two countries. Ito yung si Donbas at yung isa yung si Donetsk at si Luhansk. Ito nag-away sa away sila mga itong isa at itong isa. Ito yung nag-away to sila kasi gusto nila maging independent from Ukraine para maging independent sila. So that para ma-separate daw. Nagkaroon sila ng ceasefires sa pamamagitan sa isang protocol na Minsk. Meron isang tension kalaban ng Ukraine at ang Russia. Kasi, bakit ginawa yan? Para magkaroon ng karasan doon sa Ukraine. Next slide, please. Okay. Christian here.
All right. According to Kiev, the separatists received a significant number of weapons and ammunition from Russia. Separatists in Donbas claim two so-called states, the Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic, through a so-called referendum on May 11, 2014.
In other words, according to what said, LPR and DPR, The reason why the war in that's why they were separated because of the Russian-backed separatists. So the Luhansk People's Republic, or LPR, is a self-proclaimed breakaway state. Why? Because it was designated as a terrorist organization in Ukraine and is located in the Donbas region. LPR and DPR and the Republic of Crimea already had some clashes. Why? Because both republics are at the center of the Russo-Ukrainian crisis and deployed troops to Donbas. Next slide, please. Okay. So, between September 2014 and February 2015, si Russia, si Ukraine, France at ang Germany, nagkaroon sila ng agreement. Nag-sign sila ng Minsk Protocol, which effectively halted troop advances and greatly lowered tensions. However, ladies and gentlemen, the agreements could not be implemented and executed because the confrontations developed into trench warfare between the thousands of soldiers. In 2019, Volodymyr Zelensky was elected president of Ukraine with the promise of integrating Donbas into Ukraine. Next slide, please. Christian, your part.
Right. In December 2019, the Paris summit in the Normandy format was held for the first time in 3 years. During the summit, the leaders of Ukraine, Russia, Germany, and France stressed a complete ceasefire and adherence to the Minsk agreements. The summit didn't stop the clashes, but for Russia, Ukraine, and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe later agreed to comprehensive ceasefire beginning on July 27, 2020, which was maintained until 2021. However, Russia's military buildup on the Ukrainian border last year escalated the armed conflict in the Donbas region once again.
So, my next question, how did the US, NATO, and its allies warn that Russia was preparing again to invade Ukraine? Let's find out on the next slide. Sir Mark, next slide, please. Okay. How? The US, the United States of America, and NATO, as well as the European allies, warned that Russia is preparing again to invade Ukraine, to amass over 100,000 troops and heavy weaponry in and around the country's eastern regions. Russia dismissed all such statements, claiming that it was not preparing for an invasion and accusing Western countries of undermining its security by expanding NATO to its borders. In 2014, Russia began supporting the separatist forces in the eastern part of Ukraine against the central government. Conflict has taken 15,000 lives, according to UN. Next slide. So, my question is, how did this conflict affects Filipinos? Okay, so the two warring nations halfway around the world, but their conflict has still impact on Filipinos. Tensions in Ukraine came to a head after Russian forces launched a military operation on Thursday this week. Next slide, please. Christian.
Thank you. He noted that the cost of many agricultural commodities imported by the Philippines, like wheat and soybean, have gone up. All these could likely transmit into local prices, with the cost being transferred towards local consumers, Ross has warned. He said the situation is currently confined regionally, but its effects on the Philippines and on other economies could become more massive if the tension gets worse. The situation right now remains very fluid, and we can only hope that it doesn't get any worse. If it does, I think our authorities, especially our economic managers, remain steadfast in terms of preparing for the worst outcome in terms of pricing. process? Explain.
Based on this, why did the price of wheat and soybeans gone up? It says these are the ones that are imported by the Philippines.
Hmm.
Christian,
Yes.
why?
It's because of war. War. If there is a war, there will be destruction, especially one of farmlands and two of trade routes in different areas. So expect that supply exporting supply supply exported from that area and into the Philippines will be lessened greatly.
That's because commodities will continue to rise. The prices of commodities rise because of, di ba, recession, right? Which is the problem in the economy, right? Essentially wars and conflicts. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so according to to Roses, he said, this may be a difficult situation in our country because we are about to recover the economy from the effects of the coronavirus disease 2019 pandemic. Because actually, Christian, if we
Hmm.
recall, because of the pandemic, if you remember the lockdown that started since March 2020, it greatly affects the economy, which led to the closure of offices throughout our country. And also, what's that, Christian? Some already began skeletal workforces and the rest are done via work
Yes.
from home arrangements. And also
Yes.
last year, Proclamation number 1107 was amended and the purpose is to change some holidays into special working holidays. Why did Duterte do that? Because of the
Because
economic
economy,
recovery,
economic
para
recovery.
and also to increase economic productivity and to minimize the disruption of work. While mass gatherings are still prohibited at this time, right?
Hmm.
So, according to this, what the government can do is to aid the recovery through monetary and fiscal support. According to him, he said, subsidies in terms of fuel prices subsides, something that they did with much success last year, which actually tamed the inflationary tendencies. What we have to do at the moment is to watch out for that pass-through effect coming from this conflict between Russia and Ukraine. So mostly, it has something to do with price shocks as well. Our inflation can only serve to slow down economic growth. So I think that's where the support should come from. Why did Rosses say that, Christian?
Why?
Yes,
Because
in other economic
again,
experts.
right now the situation is, yeah, tama. We don't know where the state of conflict is right now. It can escalate or it can lessen depending on the situation. But for now, we have to be economists and all of us have to be vigilant to what's happening in that area because it will impact us as well.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so Mr. Terosa noted that the capital outflow of the Philippines will likely affect our currency, pesos. The exchange rate between the Philippine peso and the US dollar can depreciate, which make important intermediate goods or product inputs more expensive for Philippine industries and firms to buy. This can increase the pressures of inflation and reduce the purchasing power of our currency. The escalating tensions between Russia and Ukraine have caused a spike in global oil prices in recent weeks, with Brent oil now nearing $100 per barrel. This expects to translate into even higher local pump prices, which will further quicken inflation. Christian,
Hmm.
how did Mr. Terosa note the effect of capital outflow in our country which affects our currency? And then also because of the increase of costs. and the foreign currency exchange rates. Why is it so? How is this so?
Think about it this way. When we're the way our peso works is, if I recall my macroeconomics, is that the more we export, the better we are, and the more we can compete against the situation. And and if you remember from your economics class that our GDP is affected not just by our internal spending but also in external trading. So if the imports outweigh the exports, expect our GDP to go down, inflation, which will eventually cause inflation to go up, and our power to fall. And since we're pegged to the US dollar, probably the US might be interested in the area. It might also affect us as well. So
That's absolutely right.
exports and imports are a big deal for the Philippines because because our GDP depends on it, as well as our government infrastructure and consumer spending.
Okay. Next slide, please. Here's your part. Are OFWs in Ukraine are affected by the crisis? Let's find
Okay.
out that question.
So okay, thank you. Some overseas Filipino workers in Ukraine started, together with their employers, started leaving the city of Kiev after a series of explosions on Thursday following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Foreign policy experts said that the crisis might spark debates about the credibility of the US commitment to its allies. There are concerns that the Ukraine issue showed how significant or not is the US capability to deter potential threats to sovereignty in the region, said Herman Joseph S. Kraft, who heads the University of the Philippines Policy Department.
So,
So, the US the way the US would protect its allies is at stake also, because not only affects us, but also affects the two in control.
really?
Hmm.
How? It's because OFWs.
Yeah.
That's why. Because OFWs are together with their bosses or their employers decided to leave the city of Kyiv. Some they move away from Ukraine, like its borders as well, which are EU member countries, right?
Yes.
Like Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania. Because these are EU member countries. And
Hmm.
as also part as the West as well, like UK, Germany, France, right?
Yes.
And
The
that's why because of
many powerful countries are also holding a stake against that area as well. I mean, Russia is powerful. It used to be a superpower along with the US.
and also because of this, the DFE or the Department of Foreign Affairs will order the what we call as the repatriation of OFWs. They will do it at the soonest possible time, right?
Hmm.
They will begin the repatriation at that really
Yes.
for their
Yes.
safety so that they can go back to the Philippines and see our families again.
Yes.
Despite this trying time, but during this trying time, there are rules regarding that. Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, next slide, please. Okay. The president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, ordered the deployment of troops to Donetsk and Luhansk in eastern Ukraine, a move that drew chief international condemnation. Based on the email interview by of Sid L. Terosa, a senior economist of the University of Asia in the Pacific, he said that the Russia-Ukraine crisis may spook investors, prompting them to flee developing countries like the Philippines for safe havens. Why? It's because, ladies and gentlemen, tayo hindi Vladimir Putin, yung Pangulo ng Russia para makapunta ng dalawa ng mga soldiers na tiga Russia pupunta sa Ukraine para maka-invade or international condemnation.
Yes,
Next
that's
slide,
right,
please.
Mads. All right.
Next slide, please. Sir Mark. Okay.
All right.
So,
I'll take this one. Meanwhile, Malacanang is now preparing for any and all eventualities in Ukraine amid threats of a Russian invasion. Cabinet Secretary Carlo Alexei Binograles told the regular news conference on Tuesday. He said the Philippine government hopes that parties in the Russia-Ukraine crisis will explore all avenues for peace. Malamang, since we're there and since you have Filipinos there, we hope that both sides would try to maintain peace between them.
next slide, please. Okay. As tensions between Russia and Ukraine continue to escalate, the Philippine government said on Wednesday that the chief concern is the safety of overseas Filipino workers who may be affected by the Russia-Ukraine conflict. According to DFA Secretary Teodoro Teddy Boy Locsin, he said, "Our chief and singular concern is to take out of harm's way out our fellow Filipinos in Ukraine and bringing them to the nearest places of safety by the fastest possible way," according to Teddy Boy Locsin.
Hmm.
Okay, Christian, based on this slide, how did, I have a question to you regarding this slide.
Yes.
OFWs needs their safety, and that's why, how will they do this? The DFA and also the Philippine Embassy in Poland will also do the repatriation of OFWs in Ukraine
Yes.
and other Philippine to be assisted by DFA and the other Philippine embassies in Europe. Poland, ano yata sa Poland yata meron, and
Hmm.
also Philippine embassies in Germany as well and its neighboring countries as well.
Yes.
They'll be
So if you're a
assisted.
Filipino, yes.
So if you're, what you say again?
So if you're Filipino within the area, get out immediately and do not fly over that area as much as possible.
And and that's why the DFA and the Philippine embassies there will be assisting OFWs in Ukraine as well, so that they can go back to the Philippines as soon as possible, at the soonest time.
Mhm.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Hmm. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so tensions between Russia and Ukraine have intensified in recent days as Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered the deployment of troops to Donetsk and Luhansk, the two breakaway regions in the eastern part of Ukraine. After recognizing them as an independent country last Monday, Vladimir Putin's move accelerated a crisis the West fears that could unleash a major war. The United States, European Union, UK, and other countries condemned the move and to announce new sanctions against Russia. February 24, 2022, Russia launched a large-scale invasion of Ukraine, marking a major escalation of the war between Russia and Ukraine. It's ongoing since 2014. Why? Because, ladies and gentlemen, the campaign was preceded by a prolonged Russian military build-up since early 2021. Demands by Russia to legally prohibit Ukraine from joining the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, an alliance of European states and US and Canada. And that's why, because of this, what happened? Some of the I checked on the news that British Airways and it cut with Aeroflot, the Russian flag carrier, and other airline companies should stop flying over Ukraine, right?
Hmm.
And other airline companies have already suspended, not only suspend, but to get that we need to reroute away from the airspace of Ukraine. So,
Yes.
ayun. So, ayun, tapos na ang ating nagtalakay kaugnay sa gera between Russia at Ukraine. Paano
Okay.
naman yung mga Pilipino sa bansang Russia at Ukraine?
Hmm.
Paano?
Alright.
Okay.
Eh,
Ito po. Ito po.
I'll take it from. Can I take it from here?
This part.
Yes. Thank you. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is calling for peace and unity in the wake of the reports that Russia may attack Ukraine at any time. In the said video, the Ukrainian president said that Feb 16 was the attack. Zelensky further said, "We are intimidated by Great War and once again set the date in the military invasion. This is not the first time, but our state is stronger than ever." The spokesperson later clarified that the attack date actually came from US intelligence reports cited by Western media outlets. And again,
But for ito po, sabi sa
yes.
isang report, but for Filipinos in Ukraine, there is no sense of panic among them as of now. It was interviewed by Cora Adahar, an OFW living in Ukraine and the leader of the Filipino community in Ukraine. According to Ma'am Cora, she said, yung sitwasyon namin dito, wala po kaming nararanasang tension, sabi ng reporter. She adds that the Philippine Embassy constantly communicates with them and offered the chance to go back to our country. But out of 300 people in Ukraine, only handful are interested so far. Here,
Alright.
Asher.
Ito sabi ni,
Christian.
ito sabi ni Ma'am Cora, sa narinig ko, 8 Filipinos lang, pero yung iba ano dun. So all in all, Filipinos prefer to stay in Ukraine and come home in the Philippines and face uncertainty there. Grabe naman, mas pipili ng mga ibang Pinoy ang mag-risk ng buhay nila sa ibang bansa kapalit ang dolyar.
Practically.
Sa bagay.
Oo. Sana, ladies and gentlemen, dumating ang panahon na hindi na kailangan mga ibang bansa ang ating kapwa Pinoy. Kasi, why? Because you Filipinos, especially who can't finish their studies, who fear of wanting to go abroad. Because that's bet to go abroad para makahanap buhay ka sa ibang bansa. At para, what you say that, para you have more opportunities when you get there to your country where you work as OFWs.
Yeah.
That's why hindi na kailangan ang bansa kasi especially in some countries that are high risk, let's say Ukraine, some countries in Middle East and Africa, because these are affecting our safety. Especially because how is our OFWs are affected during this pandemic? Because first, mga employers, they order them to go back to the Philippines. When they arrive here, they have to abide with the quarantine protocols upon arrival. Huwag tayong mag-alala. Tiwala lang yan. Kung anong choice ng iba, igalang natin.
Yes.
May mga bagay kasi na hindi natin kayang pigilan. Wala tayong ibang pagkakataon kundi kung hindi mag-react ng nakakabuti ng naayon sa sitwasyong na kinaharap natin. Christian? Ito. Ako naman.
Carlos, is your side okay po?
Yes. Here.
Okay.
to Christian.
Yan. Alright. Ako naman, hindi pa ko I still haven't lost hope yet na magkaroon ng pantay-pantay na opportunity sa work dito kahit regardless of your age and your physical looks and your whether you have uh, whether you have whether you're normal or special, may kapansanan o wala. So,
Okay,
equal
so
opportunities for all.
that's
Hello,
why
Asher.
opportunities
Malapit
are.
na
Hi,
matapos.
Asher. We're nearing the end of our show. So, Asher,
Hello po.
hi, Asher.
Po.
Asher, I have a question. What have you learned from this topic today?
Opo, yung sa crisis po ngayon sa sa year po, yung sa Ukraine po, Russia po ay dapat matutungan po na na dapat matigil na po yung war po para maging peaceful po tayo po. At sana wala maging epekto dito po sa ating lalo sa mga OFW po mismo.
Mga kababayan nating OFW. So, and also, that's why we have choices, Asher. That's why it is depending, it's easy or hard when you go abroad to work, especially for OFWs. Why is it so, Asher? May ilang sabi na gusto niyang makapunta na ibang bansa para makatrabaho. Para mayroon silang pagkakataon di ba, Asher?
Yes po, siguro para kumita na mas marami pera po. Tsaka yung iba ay magpapakasal sa foreign national po.
Depende kung madali ba yan o mahirap. Mas better, mahirap magkakatrabaho sa ibang bansa that's why it's much better to work here in the Philippines. So you have more opportunities, especially those OFWs who are about to come back from Ukraine. Right?
Yes.
So tama kayo, kami, tatlo. Ladies and gentlemen, balang araw, mangangarap tayo para sa tamang oportunidad o pagkakataon at ating kompensasyon. Dapat natin tulungan natin ang ating bansa at sama-sama tayong umaasa para sa ating panibagong Pilipinas. Lalo na ngayong taon nito na kung saan magboboto tayo sa ating mga leader.
Yes.
Sa darating na Mayo 9, 2022, ang ating eleksyon. And so we need to have the right to. That's why, guys, and Asher, and also, sa bagay, dapat magkaisa tayo at ipagdasal natin ang ating mga kababayan natin sa Ukraine. We should continue to pray for Ukraine, whatever our religion is, for the country to be peaceful and free from wars and enemies.
Tama, Carlos. We want to peace on earth, actually. We want to peace on earth talaga. So we need to help each other out.
Okay, Carlos. Okay, before before matapos po, apologize po sa for the late inconvenience po kasi nakatulog ako after may basa yung script po yun na ipadala kanina. And also, wala po ako nung last week. Nasa Kalamba po ako for family matters. And ngayon, bumalik na po ako kahit sandali lang po dahil wala masyado na inatok ako ko mismo bawi na lang po sa next week po. Ayos na din ako ngayon yung po sa show po afterwards. Okay, guys, we'll see you next week na po, Carlos, Christian, and Sir Mark Betita po, ha? Okay.
Asher here. Here your here's your part. Asher, can you read this?
Okay, wala pa. Parang wala pa eh.
Asher, this is your new part na.
So, part
Let's see. Okay. Alright.
okay, abo na.
Christian, ikaw na to. Asher, can you read this please here? Okay. Or
Um,
gusto mo Christian na lang
All
your
right.
part.
I'll take it away. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap for Magpayo tayo Conclusion for Saturday, the 26th of February 2022. On behalf of InkluRadyo and Inclusion Philippines, this is Carlos Kanahashi, Christian Chan, and Mark Betita. Sorry, Christian Chan, Asher Santos, and our technical supervisor, Mark Betita.
Asher, your part please here. Can you read this part? So, we would like to remind everyone that tomorrow is Sunday, and as Hands in Inclusion puts God first, regardless of our religion, it is a day of rest and faith. And because of this, we should be courteous, considerate, and respectful to people who are attending religious services. Your cooperation in your silence will be appreciated as we enter the holy presence of God. Asher,
and Carlos,
I'll
and kung Carlos, before
yes.
before pa may tayo magtapos, may magbabay po sa host sa Magpayo po next week po. Basta kung sino po ito, so abangan po next Saturday po.
Right.
Tama.
Okay? Let's all read this.
Bye-bye na.
May
Ang Diyos,
awa ang Diyos, makakaraos po
maraos po
tayo,
tayo.
sama-sama
Sama-sama
na
tayong
tayong
lalaban
lalaban para sa
para sa
pangarap,
panganap, pamilya,
pamilya, at
at
bayan,
bayan hanggang sa
hanggang ating tatak para sa
para sa
One
One Inclusion Nation.
Inclusion Nation. Muli, magandang gabi at pagpalain ang tayo ng buong may kapal. May the Almighty God bless us all.
As all.
Pilipinas, God
God
first.
first.
HNI,
HNI
God
first.
first. Thank you for watching. Magpayo tayo kay Inclusion. Spokonay Noche. Good night and bye for now.
All right.
Christian, here.
Thank you.
Can you read this
In
part, please?
solidarity, yes. In solidarity with Ukraine, we leave you now with the playing of the national anthem of Ukraine. Ladies, gentlemen, and mga inclusion. Shechene Vermela Ukraini. Sorry kung I mispronounce it. The national anthem of Ukraine.
Thank you very much and goodbye for now. You may leave the StreamYard while the national anthem is playing. Thank you.